2026. Phone numbers on the screen and on the ticker. And in the comments, I will post it as well. It's the temporary number, but I'm using a new system. And I think once my free trial's over, I'll be picking up a number that has some kind of significance, some kind of a vanity 800 number. And phones are going to be open pretty much from now on, unless there's something very important. We can't get interrupted. But for the most part, I'll leave the phones on, even 24/7, because when we reinstate the 24/7 live stream, we'll likely get a lot of calls from people who think that we're live. And so I want to be able to capture voicemails. And I want to really direct the calls toward the topics at hand. You know, I think it's important that we maintain a focus, and that means certain things that we've already figured out we can just move on from. So we're not going to belabor any points here. I don't think we need to retread any old ground. We need to stand on this foundation we have established. We're the least confused people on the world stage. If you remember, I did upload a video a little while ago. It's essentially a rough draft for a new infographic where I'm trying to introduce this concept of the manipulated timeline and history bending through the use of demonstrating how the news cycle, which defines our now, is merged with this series of fake events. And I'm really trying to drive home the point that we're not talking about PR stunts or hoaxes. We're talking about historically significant events that become part of our collective worldview, our paradigm, our shared history. So this history faking, history manipulation, in my view, is not only a successful conspiracy, but it's the only one that we should be focusing on. I mean, people can focus on whatever, I don't care. But I'm just saying, it looks to me like the majority of the popular conspiracy theories have been put there strategically to waste your time and divert your focus. Because we know enough now. And the Great Deconstruction Project is just starting. It's going to be crowdsourced intel. It's going to grow exponentially. But we're putting the framework in for these more thorough breakdowns of events, the alleged simulated events, the hoax indicators that lead us to think these things are fake. Not to mention the concurrent predictive programming, the involvement of entertainment, Hollywood, video games, authored books. It's all part of this monolithic worldview shaping mechanism that puts us into a shared delusion, a mass agreed upon delusion. What's up, Euphoric Crunch from Kick? So we're on Kick, we're on YouTube, and we are on X. And we're doing this because as we move forward, we're going to be leading the live stream with a title that's usually a question to draw in callers. I mean, I have no problem entertaining mainstreamers because this is ultimately the point of debate. It's not to change the person's mind necessarily, but to better understand their opinion and their perspective. And my contention here is that you cannot arrive at the big picture. You cannot arrive at the totality of what we're looking at if you don't shift your perspective. And the perspectives that we have exist within a bubble. And this includes alt media, who are the most delusional people on earth. Yeah, what's up, Ida Gago? Yeah, we had to time you out last night because you had like 33 comments for every other comment. It's like, this is some stream of consciousness. That's cool. But other people are complaining because it's like they couldn't talk over you. What's up, Armin? Thanks for joining. And thanks for ordering a copy of the first part of the Great Deconstruction. You can see what it is, the history of news bending. We're focusing on 1963 to 2026. And I'm using these formatted documents, basically PSYOP breakdown sheets. And we're doing this alongside the breakdown of world stage characters, which is part 2, which I'll be releasing in a few days. And the third part will go into symbols, numbers, colors, etc. All these things that we see repeatedly in the theater of Psy-War. So we'll get into the subtext, the weird occulty stuff that's there. My point of it is we're systematizing our findings and we're feeding it to AI and seeing what further information or connections we can extrapolate. And we're also just demonstrating the internal consistency, our consistency, and the fact that we've identified what I term systemic fakery, that the entertainment works hand in glove with government in order to shape public perception about events that are going to happen. And they don't have a crystal ball. They're writing your future. The bread and circuses focuses around this big show. And to the extent that you believe in it, you're programmed and you're part of it. And people are hardwired in. It's emotional. It's built into their epistemology. In other words, the way they process information when it comes to TV is selectively non-skeptical, gullible, credulous, and passive. So in a way, they get this download of additional things that you can't verify that you're supposed to assume to be true into your frame of reference every single day. Armin Ross says, will the interpretation of the psyops as they link together into a coherent narrative as in each individual piece fits into the bigger picture? Oh, yes. See, I think what we're seeing here, specifically with a lot of the black and white stuff, the number 42, 33, we see these consistent patterns, and everything seems to be established along this, what I call a duopoly, the bifurcation, the political horseshoe, which is created by triangulating the two sides. So this black and white, this Hegelian dialectic thing is inherent in it, but it also contains some kind of notion of alchemy. And this all ties into the great work of ages, or the great work. These are terms that you hear from like Theosophy, Thelema, Freemasonry, that refer to the New Age. And this New Age happens to involve this collective transformation of consciousness. And I happen to think that we're experiencing it right now. And I don't think it means elevated consciousness, like enlightenment in a transcendental way. No, I mean we're being lulled into a new collective worldview that essentially supplants all religion. So we have a one world system, but it's this internalized Truman Show. And we've been collectively hoodwinked. Like the wool's been pulled over our eyes. We can no longer tell when we're being lied to because we're getting so much of our information from visuals that can deep fake anything. And it's getting better all the time. So you can only assume it's going to reach perfection. And it doesn't even need to be perfect. It's already fooling people as is. So what I'm saying here is that part of this process, there's this Manly P. Hall, Masonic historian, who wrote Secret Destiny of America. And it seems to indicate that America is like a Tower of Babel construct or a phoenix. In other words, it's meant to be destroyed. And in doing so, it's meant to expunge all those things that we have to leave behind to have a happy one world system. Like the movie Pluribus I talked about, the series where there's a hive mind and you have this one holdout, and if she can only just merge with the collective, everyone can be happy. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. And I think that's why America has these frontmen, like Trump and Elon Musk, who could be looked at as the epitome of what we need to get rid of to move into the new age. That's how they've been represented. Musk as the main polluter of the major commons of low Earth orbit and the internet. If you think about disease X, mind viruses, and Musk's role in that, you can see that he's had a very measurable and destructive impact on systems. And I've heard criticisms, I've read criticisms for years that no one individual should have that much power, and having that much money shouldn't give someone the power to destroy the world, essentially. And one thing about him, by the way, is he's been villainized through entertainment as predictive programming characters reflect this Musk character. And in every instance, he's destroying the world with his memes, with the generative AI, or the madness that he unleashes, the hate. So they've created these characters for us to experience as our history. And I think what really summarizes it is megalopolis. Megalopolis is essentially megalon, make Rome great again. It's about Trump. It's about MAGA, but it's about America being hit by some Russian satellite, a 9/11 situation. And the movie ends where the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States is replaced with the Pledge of Allegiance to humanity. My point of it is the secret destiny of America points to this metascript concept that, in broad strokes, has been written hundreds of years in advance. And we're living through the staged historical sinking of an empire. And it's been foreshadowed with metaphors like the Titanic, Twin Towers. And in many ways, throughout the movies that we watch, you're often seeing this characterization of America, like in Don't Look Up. America as it's like the Earth is the Titanic, and the iceberg is now a comet about to hit the Earth. And the rich, greedy capitalists decide to mine the thing instead of deflecting it, and we all get killed. And that's a metaphor for climate change. And America is seen as essentially the main outlier, nonconformist, the one responsible for climate chaos globally. You know, I was listening to this Daily Beast podcast because I listen to brainwashing on the left and the right. And there's this leftist talking about Maui, the Maui fires, that conspiracy theorists think were caused by space lasers. And I'm listening to this podcast, and she's like, I just want to say sorry. I want to apologize to those in Maui for what my CO2 output did to contribute to your disaster over there. She was apologizing for climate change. What's up, Dorian? Diana South. Yeah, so when I say the program, I'm referring to the sequence of fake events that have been scheduled years in advance, that are performed before our eyes and end up grafted onto our history. There's that fusion of real and fake. Now, this sequence of events, I refer to it as the program. Like you go to a theater, you get a program so you know what's going to come up over the next few hours. But I refer to it as the metascript. So the metascript refers to the big story, and then you have all these little stories that supplement it along the way. So when we have a character on the world stage who's performing in multiple fake events, we usually refer to them as being metascripted, like they're written into the show. And predictive programming, concurrent programming, and reinforcement programming, we're talking about elements in the entertainment that reinforce the psyops, is one of the areas where this whole thing is given away, where you can see the consistency of the psyop to entertainment relationships and how nuanced it is. This isn't cherry picking, selectivity bias, Texas sharpshooter fallacy. No, we have receipts. And I've had plans to do this for some time, but now thanks to Perplexity AI, it's actually possible to do it without a staff. Because we're showing receipts, we're showing with precision how the coordination exists. And then from that, you can determine an approximate date. Like, how long ago was this particular event already in the program? And that's where it gets to be a bit of a reveal. Because if we're right about this, and I say we are, and I'm putting everything out there so that we can start this conversation, it has significant implications that need to be confronted. Because it suggests that maybe, you know, a lot of things that we take for granted are illusory. For example, politics, voting. Is any of it real? Was Trump predestined, so to speak? Was he inevitable because he was part of the program? Do we have any kind of input or say? Or is this all some kind of, as Walter Lippmann wrote, a sublimated civil war? Like the Orwellian concept of the perpetual war, war is peace, but it's waged in the minds. And the mind war serves as a outlet and as a way to measure public temperament on anything, and to be the least destructive way of managing the herd. What's up, Etheric Bliss? Thanks for joining. And one of the things I've been talking about as of late is how the movie screen is the Overton window. If it's on the movie screen, people are ready to believe it. Steven Spielberg announces an alien movie. Now people suddenly believe in aliens. Well, they opened the Overton window. They expanded it to encompass alien life. And many people think it's a scientific proposition because it's science fiction-y. Well, there's a difference between science and science fiction, but the masses don't seem to know this. So the alien is, in fact, a superstition, like a cryptid. So it's a superstition. It's not an ology. It's not a serious study. It's a mythology created by the government, admittedly. If you haven't seen Mirage Men, it's a must-watch. It's about the local Air Force base here. Someone close by, a conspiracy theorist, was going online and talking about craft he was seeing that were classified. So they infiltrated his life. They pretended to be his friend, and they fed him disinformation about underground alien bases, alien abductions, etc. And what that did is it started really creating the ufology culture. There were conferences. People were meeting. People were sharing stories about their own abductions. So this small group of disinformation agents actually managed to plant seeds that spread, and the whole thing self-perpetuated because a lot of believers just made stuff up. So it's just all lies, agents and shills. And it turns out that they were also, not only were they trying to discredit him as a witness to anything he might see with this alien stuff, but they also used the conferences at hotel rooms as honeypots so they could know who was in the know about what, who saw what picture, who saw what craft. So this is all essentially a form of contact tracing and quarantining certain ideas, muddying the waters for the witnesses. So it's all just, strategic mind control operations to control the flow of information and discredit witnesses. That's where ufology really begins. So what I'm saying here is that there's no reason to think there's anything behind it just because a Steven Spielberg movie's coming out. But you see where people are at. And for a few years, I've been talking about left, right, aliens, and demons. And now you see it. It's on full display. I've been saying for some time that the right is going to, I said, if aliens invade, and I said this a few years ago, MAGA will show up with shotguns to fight the UFOs. And the left will embrace the aliens. Well, that's where we're at right now. The progressive dominant worldview, the mainstream establishment, they're very much promoting a belief in aliens. And from the right wing, you're hearing that it's all demonic, transdimensionals, and evil. And this fits a bigger pattern. And the fact that it fits a pattern, that this is a template that these things are adhering to, is another indicator it's a big hoax. And if the past precedent is any indicator, we're most likely going to see an invasion of nothing burgers. It's just going to be a movie that they got your attention. Everyone's looking. All the shills are out promulgating their mythology, keeping people immersed in escapism and science fiction fantasy, which is where they want us. This thing is about maintaining a perpetual circus in the minds. They don't have to deliver. They don't have to nuke us. They don't have to bring down aliens to keep the show running. I saw this, I think it was a Time magazine cover with Nixon from like 1973 or something about, we're going to release the UFO stuff. It's like they've been dangling this out there for 50 plus years. No resolution. Like, just get on with it already. Nuke us. And then bring the aliens to punish us for using the nuke. I think that's the story. All right, so anyway, we are, if you're a member of the channel, we're going over these. I'm preparing to launch a series of whiteboards. So I'm creating infographics to be able to explain the compartmentalized invisible cage. It's something that has to be conceptualized, and and the visualizations do help. And it's really about your position on the stage. It's about your point of view. And if your point of view is within their parameters, you will never arrive at the correct conclusion. And it's kind of comical to see how many variations people can come up with to explain something that cannot be explained from their perspective, because their perspective is not inclusive of special effects, media fakery, crisis actors, crisis acting presidents, squibs, gushing blood. What's up, ears up? Thanks for joining. Well, I'm looking forward to these whiteboards. That's why I've been working on so many drafts, because I'm not just randomly putting things on a board. I'm trying to make the most concise breakdown of these concepts that I possibly can, so I can present it alongside book readings and sell the book and get people up to speed on the concept, so we can at least have an intelligent discussion about it. Buzzing Fret says, Tim, do you think Jim Carrey's pulling an Andy Kaufman on the world, a joke on the world stage, and people are falling for it? Sadly, I think Jim Carrey is just a victim of his own association with conspiracy theorists. And he was expecting to get this award. He got a facelift. He got a brow lift. He's 64. So he kind of set himself up for it. But I don't see a conspiracy theory in it. I don't see the upside for him having his plastic surgery hyper scrutinized. So I kind of think that I think he's not doing anything. And I think there's a lot of people just adding on to this existing story of Jim Carrey. Because if you look at all his various speeches, you can come up with a certain story, but people are taking things out of context. Like he's talking about how everything's a lie, and he sounds disenchanted with the world and stuff. He wasn't calling out the elite. That was a criticism, I think, of Trump and ICE. So I don't trust any of the truthers spreading information about Jim Carrey. And I was really pushing back on the notion that he was a clone, because to even assert that, you have to say, I believe that they can clone a full-grown man. I'm not going to stand by that statement, but you have to say he was a clone. So I think it's worth pushing back on it. If anyone says Jim Carrey never existed, he's always been CGI, you can dismiss them as well. I've heard some say, oh, he transitioned into an androgen to reflect his alchemical perfection. And so I'm looking at these various explanations as they're cool, but they're also pure conjecture. So it's kind of outside my purview to even care that much. And I take an Occam's razor to the table here, because there weren't any examples of this. Everyone was saying, like, even Tim Pool, oh, he just got bored and he replaced himself with a body double. And the people are like, no, it's a guy in a mask. You mean the hyper realistic mask that looked just like the person? How come this one doesn't look just like him? Did they order the mask from Temu? So there are inconsistencies. So what I'm trying to point out here is that I'm like, what is the reasonable claim? What reasonable claims are being made here? And I haven't heard one yet, other than, well, I've heard one person say that was Jim Carrey's face worn by somebody else as a warning to the other Hollywood celebrities to stay in line. So there's this frazzle drip twist on the whole thing. But I really think that we need to operate with the auto hoaxing methodology, as in fake until proven real, which doesn't only apply to what the mainstream says, but also the built-in assumptions of the alternative. So if you're going to assert he's been replaced, you have to kind of first falsify the existing status quo explanations. And has anyone found anything more plausible than a facelift and brow lift? And then if so, do you place your opinion's weight above that of several highly rated plastic surgeons who can, with meticulous detail, describe what you're seeing? I think it was also more or less organic and an indicator of where Trutherville is at. They're in it for entertainment, for engagement bait, for essentially gossip. It's tabloid. The conspiracy theory realm is tabloid. So it's not even necessarily trying to connect to reality. So in that sense, you can look at it in that frame. Like, I love weekly world news. I was saddened that they had to retire the whole thing. It's one of the reasons why I started the Insider, which we're bringing back into publication, because I missed the whole tabloid thing, especially when it's fiction or satire or parody. So I don't have a problem with conspiratainment, but I think we should acknowledge that's what it is, unless someone can explain what the whole significance of it was without adding a bunch of stuff. So if your whole premise rests on full-grown clones and hyper-real masks that don't match, it doesn't really have a lot of legs to stand on. Diana Southheart says, I believe Stephen Greer used to have groups that would summon UFOs in the desert. Yeah, and he's come out against the whole demon thing. He says the demon interdimensional explanation is misinformation so that the government can hide human-piloted UFOs. That's his explanation. Stephen Greer looks like an alien, according to a lot of people. What's up, X322? Thanks for joining. And I think David Wilcox also looks like an alien. Like, a lot of these alien pushers kind of look like hybrids. I don't know if it's a branding thing, but it helps. You know, like, if you're into paranormal, it helps to look a little spooky. Wear black. But if you're going to push aliens, you know, emphasize your alienishness, however it manifests. Venom says Bulgarian mystic Baba Venga predicts we will get aliens by November, by the midterms, huh? Now, I fully expect that they're going to ramp up the terrestrial xenophobia as we get closer to the midterms. So we're going to hear again about Haitians, you know, watch your cats and dogs. That whole thing's going to come back. But I think it's notable here that the alien phobia that we see comes from the same side of the political spectrum, and it applies to both terrestrial and extraterrestrial. I've asked Elon Musk about Mars or the moon. Like, are they going to have walls up there? You know, are you going to have the countries establish moon bases in separate areas? And then how are you going to maintain separation like that? Or is nationalism only a thing for here on Earth? See, I think that the whole space thing exists partially as a thought experiment. So it's the new heaven, as I've described it. It supplants it's actually the heaven that all the religious people agree upon, and the atheists. So you have ubiquitous agreement about space as our destination, multiplanetary. That's our utopia. But they use these moon bases and Mars bases as scenarios so we could determine, you know, what is the most sustainable way to live as one. You know, this is beyond Earth politics. It's about survival as a species. And I think what they're doing is they're trying to establish the ideal society. And this is not new. There was a book called Red Star from like 1906 from Russia about Mars being communist and Earth scientists going to Mars and seeing how perfect it is and bringing it back down here. So Red Star, space communism, that's been in the talk since before we ever went to the moon. So when you go to space, you're not taking your free markets, you're not taking your carbon footprint, you're not taking your MAGA hats or your guns. You see what I mean? It's about getting us to think in those terms so we can make Earth as it is on Mars. Now, aliens might have a role in this, but I've been thinking that because there's so much predictive programming and conditioning for this inevitable arrival, but I've been thinking the alien thing really entails a higher intelligence taking the wheel. Like, you know, humanity can't be trusted to drive itself home. We've gone mad, and they need to take away our weapons of mass destruction and get us to live in harmony so we can join the Galactic Federation. So you have this alien rapture scenario kind of built into all these scenarios. And the reason why they are uniquely equipped to do so is they're smarter than us, and they're not corrupt. They're not part of any of our systems or institutions or outsiders. They're impartial. And I'm thinking, if we can accept that premise, then why wouldn't we accept the premise that AI might be a better judge, might be better in everything, from president on down? So they might not even bring in literal aliens, but they might bring in a higher intelligence to take over and unify us, unify all mankind. And that would essentially kind of still track with the programming, get them to accept the premise. One group can call it aliens, one can call it demons, as long as they accept the premise that something's coming. So I think we have been witnessing the widening of the Overton window and the introduction of new superstitions into common discourse to prepare us for the unbelievable. They're getting us ready for whatever's coming. And they need us to be sort of they need us to be kind of, I would say, discombobulated, expecting anything, suggestible. Just the fact that there's another ET movie coming has everyone hyper suggestible about aliens. All the Fallout movies, the nuke movies, it all seems to be coalescing. So today there was a guy on a plane said, "I'm going to bomb the plane, death to America, Allah Akbar." I'm looking to see if there's anything else about this. An Egyptian plane taxis on the tarmac. No, that's 2020. I'm looking for the one today. Okay, so as a Southwest flight. And then they brought in the SWAT team. I think that's the one. Indian man fakes Muslim identity and makes threats. Okay, so he was actually cosplaying or faking it, acting. Anyway, it's more or less fake news. It's a psyop. Faking a Muslim identity, Indian man makes bomb threats on UK flight. But you know, the headline alone that went out this morning probably triggered everyone. I think I saw the headline somewhere on Twitter and it was like, "Death to America." It turns out it's just some guy having some kind of a psychosis. All right, continuing here. I didn't know that was fake. I was just waiting for an update before I discussed it. And yeah, that was fake. All right, let's see. Venomous says Plandopolis was the city run by AI. Well, Megalopolis, I alluded to earlier, is one of these movies that has a Trump-esque character who survives an assassination attempt, and it's about the world being united. But it has a lot of these themes that we talk about, the sinking of America as a necessary step on the way to a one world system. And in that one, it was a Russian satellite that hits New York. And when the movie was in the film festivals before it hit the theaters, right when it hit the film festivals, there was a story of a Russian satellite, an old retired satellite that had blown up into hundreds of pieces, and they had to lock down the ISS. So that's interesting timing. The movie itself, and this is again Francis Ford Coppola, was supposed to come out before 9/11, but a movie about the destruction of New York after 9/11 or at around the same time wouldn't have sold very well in his view. So he postponed it for 20 some years. But it contains footage from 9/11/01. If you've seen the movie, there's a montage. It does have footage from that day. And it introduces the quote design authority. So we talk about metascriptors, the writers, those who are in charge of controlling our fake history. And in this Megalopolis, it opens up with this monologue about how empires fall and how history unfolds over time. And the design authority fit the description of what I term metascriptors. Nothing Major 777 says Trump must destroy the ring. There can be no religion to rule them all. Now, I don't think they're replacing religion. I mean, they are in a sense. They've supplanted. They've made religion irrelevant. because now they're subsets of an even bigger religion. So they can all coexist along with atheists. And they all exist within the world stage system, which I contend fits the definition of a religion. So when people say there are no real, like if you're even like you're an atheist, they're like, well, you're still, it's like on some level, they can't really fully claim to be atheistic. They still have God constructs. They still have a religious paradigm. Like there really is no way out of it without seeing it, but it's a default religion. And by religion, I mean worldview, God constructs. It has a creation myth. It has eschatologies. I mean, what are aliens but angels with science fiction, mixed into it? And the thing about Trump, like I mentioned, he's the character in Megalopolis, and he's opposed by the mayor who tries to sets up an assassination attempt. The mayor, of course, is the same actor who plays Edgar in The Boys, who opposes the Trump character, the Homelander. So one of the things we've noted is that whenever you have a world stage person like Trump or Musk, and you look at their corresponding roles or characters in entertainment, you'll find other roles in those films that track film to film. And it's a subtext. So there's this story about, or there's this dynamic between Trump and Obama that goes along with every one of these instances of Trump in these movies where he's surviving an assassination attempt. And I think this ties in to this concept of the political horseshoe. And this became very clear after Leave the World Behind, a Higher Ground production. The Obamas produced it, which emphasized the year 1619. And 1776 is emphasized by the January Sixers. So 1619, 1776 are representative of the extremes on the political horseshoe. And Obama and Trump epitomize the values of each of these dates and what they symbolize. But anyway, when it comes to religions, they don't need to go away because they serve the system. There's no reason to replace them when they've been supplanted. So they're just subsets. I don't see religion going away. And they also need this constant dynamic. They don't want everyone to be progressive. They want half to be regressive, the other half to be progressive. One half wants to change things and evolve things. The other thing wants to go back to the way things were. That's what MAGA means. Make America Great Again means great, as in before feminism, civil rights, before the Great Society. In other words, nostalgia, the past, traditional values instead of this progressive thing. So the system is designed to have these opposing sides. They don't want ubiquitous agreement. So that's why I think religions aren't going away, because they need religiosity. The right is targeted with satanic panic, moral panic, and they wouldn't be falling for that stuff if they abandoned their hold on traditional values. Oki says, I saw Obama and Trump laughing together recently. That was weird. See, it wasn't weird to me, but it should be inflicting cognitive dissonance on every single QAnoner. Because the story here is that Obama is the one who's setting up these assassination attempts, that it's some kind of fight or feud between the two. And Trump has been in the picture with Obama since the birther movement, where he's the one who really popularized the notion that President Barack Obama was illegitimate because he was from Kenya. And then his friend, the comedian who had died on the operating table, was it Joan Rivers? She's the one who started out with the whole Michelle Obama is a man thing. So it's kind of interesting to look at the evolution of this whole relationship between Trump, the conspiracy theorists, and the Obamas. Because the QAnons have said for years that Trump had Obama taken to Guantanamo and that now he's been replaced. I mean, they've said this for a long time. They've already claimed that scalp. 91 Oki says Obama killed 26,000 people without war declaration. I don't know if I believe that. In fact, I don't believe it. I would need more information. Because Donald Trump is not the only actor, this reality TV star crisis actor on the world stage, playing out a historic role as a historic personage through a series of fake events. He's not the only one. This would include the Obamas. And the fact they were involved with Leave the World Behind, with all of its subtext, all of its predictive programming, tells you they're insiders and they're part of the show. Armin says, correspondence, the right are like Papist Catholics, the left are like anti-Baptist Protestants, both believe in the same religion. Yeah, I agree with that. However, I would identify the left as the papists and the anti-media, the conspiracy theorists as the Protestants. If you look at the Eucharist and the sacraments as having been updated, well, the injectable Eucharist, that's a leftist thing. The anti-vax, the ones refusing the Eucharist, are the right. Hey, what's up, caller?
Hey, it's Diana.
Hey, thank you for calling, Diana.
Happy Saturn Day, and thank you for doing the phone. I think your program is really good. I know a lot of times we talk about things like Revelation and the Bible and all these other things, and I absolutely believe all of these things have already happened. And for the most part, most people think that it's still off in the future. So it makes that part, weaving it into the meta script, is pretty easy because people believe that it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I've seen your comments about that, and everything I read on the subject says that the idea that these are future calamities is a modern interpretation, that it's kind of a new thing.
Yes, and that is what I believe. And I really don't have an exact way to prove it. However, I do. I was raised as a Catholic. I left that because I really felt like I was born into a cult. And, they scare you by hanging a dying God in front of you and worrying about sin, and you're going to do this, and you got to confess, and all these crazy ideas. So as I grew older, and I'm now 61, but I've read and gone and done, and I've had all kinds of strange things happen in my life. I've considered myself a born again Christian now, but people that I know that are Catholics think that now I'm an anathema, meaning like I'm damned for hell or whatever because I don't believe the religion or the cult following.
Yes.
Now,
I've seen that. That's my main criticism of religion, is that I think people can be their own thing. I see people going to church. They always look happy. I like church people, but I dislike this competition, this like built-in tribalism that seems to bring out these negative attitudes where people suddenly can't be friends with people they disagree with over, text, different interpretations of text.
Exactly. And I've made a point many times, even in the chat, is as a so-called Christian person myself, I've never met anybody that believes exactly the same way I do. Even of like preachers that I've listened to and understood a lot of what they were talking about and agreed with a lot of it. There's also another part that just said, yeah, this part just isn't, there just isn't anything to hold water or to make it more realistic for me, because so many of us are just, and myself included, a hypocrite. Basically, I'll say one thing and kind of act a different way, and it sort of depends on the crowd. So, we're all guilty of that, and we're just human, whatever that is. I absolutely do believe that the world that we live in is human-centric. it is about us. And yes, the universe, we are created out of the same stuff, whatever our universe is. I don't know how to describe it, but I definitely don't think it's the stuff that they've indoctrinated me with throughout my life.
Right.
And by the way, those magical desks that you'd hide under if you
Yes.
were to see the flash. I remember doing those drills as a young child. So, I mean, they like in each generation, I think they've come up with these things that just keep you in fear, like you talked about that program, The Village.
Yeah, it's analogous to The Village, exactly, where they even did drills so the children are hiding in basements while the adults in monster costumes pretend like they're trying to break in.
Yes. Now, I'm kind of at a disadvantage because I don't have any like running internet in my house other than my old cell phone, and I don't own a television, and I don't get to see Netflix or any of these shows anymore. But over the course of my life, I've watched thousands of movies and listened to thousands of songs, and you like learn the lyrics and you learn the dialogue and you remember these things, and they're all like just supplanted in my brain somewhere. They're like a little seed that's been planted in there, and you don't dig the seed up to see if it's growing. That seed can sit in the ground for a long time, and then all of a sudden, you know what, it starts to bloom when something kind of activates it. And I've come to think that this is how they are able to pre-write history and plant these little seeds along our memories somewhere, because many of us use different types of media, whether video game or movie or television or
I see what you're saying.
Music.
Like, yeah. So like, because I mean, we talk about predictive programming as a form of advertisement, and advertisers know they have to hit you with an idea 7 or 8 times before you respond to it. So they know this, but it would make sense to me if the subconscious cannot differentiate between real and fake, and it's fed a parallel storyline. I think it would establish some sort of like they could build a narrative framework over time. And this is kind of the concept of the mind virus, that you can passively absorb belief clusters without even knowing it. And I think that's what's happening with the planting of seeds strategically throughout our lives, so that we accept something as inevitable that we're going to do anyway.
Yes, this is and this is why it makes the Bible and this future destruction of the universe, or that we live in, as inevitable, because the people that are interpreting the Bible in a way is that they're talking about, they're not looking at audience relevance. When you're writing a historical piece, you're writing down things as people of the day would understand it, right? And so, like, if I were to say, like, barf out, gag you with a spoon to a person that is 20 years old, they would have no idea what I was talking about. But if you were maybe 40, you might know. And so things are written to an audience. And so one of the things in the Bible that says, and according to C.S. Lewis, the most embarrassing verse of the Bible was basically Jesus was telling those people that were standing there that they were going to see these things happen in their generation. And a generation, we know, just like it is today, you're going to see it in your lifetime, right? But for those people that call themselves Christians, if they ignore these kinds of things that Jesus said, then they make him out to be a liar. Or that there's people on this earth that are more than 2,000 years old, which just doesn't seem quite logical.
Yeah, I think
so those people that were standing there.
It's strategy. They definitely realized if we can put people into end times, if we can make this more immediate, it's an easier sell and it gives more control to the priesthood. I think that we're in the end times now because of weapons of mass destruction. Fake as they may be, implausible as it might be, the threat of mutually assured destruction from nukes is viable to most people, and they actually organize geopolitics on this basis. So you can see the entire world stage game board has been put into an end times scenario, and it's done solely for the purpose of giving power to the storytellers, the middle of this thing.
The threat of the thing is worse than the thing, and that threat can be woven in through so many different means. Now, the thing about these religions and different churches or beliefs is that then the government gives them all like these tax breaks. Right? So in a way, whether they know it or not, they're part of this whole plan, because I mean, this whole metascript, they're all part of it. Whether they're just a mule not even knowing that they're doing it, or there probably are some that do have some discernment that are actually doing it intentionally. And like in that program where they were trying to fake space, you only need a few people to help, keep guiding the narrative.
Yeah, that's another good point too, is that a lot of the people are unwittingly participants in it. Like, I don't think most people in media know that media itself is used to fabricate events on a regular basis. It's on a need to know basis, it's based on security clearances, and it's highly compartmentalized. And so most people who are serving the monolith don't have a clue. And I think that's true with all religions. I think all religions, just based on their perspective, like all media outlets, are inherently biased towards the program. It's just where they're at, it's their perspective.
Yeah. And changing someone's mind about it is a huge task. And I don't even know if I would even want to. I think the thing would be to, somehow to make people curious, right? I mean, because no one's just going to go, oh yeah, this was fake, and that other historical event was fake. And they will just, they will come at you with their own bias, their own, we all have that inherent. We don't want to be shown that we're wrong, right? And we don't even want to consider that we're wrong if we're walking around with an uninquisitive mind. Now, I think that's really what separates us here in the raft, is that we want to know, even if we're wrong, we want to explore and, touch it and feel it and look at it and, poke it and see what happens. And I think that's what's really happening here with auto hoaxing, is that, and you have to have that sense of that curiosity,
Yes,
that you have as a naive kid, and be willing to explore these other things. But
well, I've said before that we're more of a philosophical. Well, this is
not look at that.
We're more like philosophical than political, because if you're in politics, you have an agenda. It's not even about truth or curiosity; it's just power. And we're more into the breakdown of it from a philosophical perspective and how we perceive. And it's also, I think, it delves into metaphysical, because this is ultimately coming from a place of curiosity and wanting to know. And that's why I consider this to be media Gnosticism versus the believers, who are, again, the majority.
As a first grader, and I started school when I was 4 years old. So I was probably 5 and maybe even 6, very early 6 years old, when my teacher, Sister Loretta, said that only Catholics could go to heaven. And as a young child, my brain said, well, then where did Jesus go? Because he was a Jew. And so I got in trouble for even asking such a question, right? They try to squash that out of you and burn that curiosity out of you, even as a kid, because they teach you to memorize stuff and not really think through the whole logistics of what they're trying to say. And we're not looking in a logical form. We're just repeating because we were taught that if you go along with the plan and you memorize these things and you hide on your desk when the bell fires and you do this thing in certain way, then you're rewarded. But if you fight back or question it, you're
curiosity is punished. But well, I would describe this, because this curiosity thing, it also extends to their own side. Mainstream news consumers aren't even curious about what they believe because they take the surface value. I make this distinction between low information believers and informed disbelievers, because there's this irony in that we who don't believe in the things know more about the things than the people who do believe in it. And that just speaks to their lack of curiosity. It's a form of laziness or passivity, but it's inexcusable given today's media situation to just outsource your perception like people have been doing.
Yeah, it's a learned passivity, I believe. And because think of any 3-year-old. Have you ever seen them in the store? What's this? What does that feel like? Can I bite that? What color is that? Why is it doing that? You know, they ask a million questions. They want to touch everything, but you'll see the parent just completely shut them down, right? And so, because the parent themselves has been trained to, to put it, just put a cork in it, basically.
And you know what I find annoying too, though, is that truthers will say, we're just asking questions, and they'll ask questions, but they're not answering them. Because I believe in asking questions, but I think it's not just about what's that, but it's rather what's that internally, and then you try to find the answer. And I see the people saying, I'm just asking questions, as disingenuously promoting a premise without having to be accountable to it. So I'm all for asking questions, but I also think we have to be the ones to seek the answers. And seeking is the active mode of perception rather than the passivity of, believing and following.
And that's what separates us. And that's the hard barrier to cross. As we've gotten older, we dig our heels in. So we just continue on that for the most part, not everyone, but, it's easier on that other path, right? No one to argue with. You don't have to come up with any facts. You don't have to support what you're saying. You can just go along to get along. You become gray man. You blend in. You shut up. You put your head down, and you do as you're told.
Well, that's my selling point on this, is that, they've made it easy to default conform. But what I'm presenting is this perspective that by allowing yourself to be hardwired into this, you're more reactive, they're tapping into your emotions, and you're being emotionally manipulated, and it's wasting your bandwidth, your perception, your attention. And that the incentive to becoming a skeptic is that you can unplug with no guilt from all this extraneous information and useless expenditure of energy and direct it towards your own life. So I think skepticism is an easy sell, especially today, and especially when you frame it as the superior position from an intellectual perspective. The skeptic is in a superior position. There's no reason to be a believer in media these days. You can be an informed disbeliever by default. And that's what I'm promoting here, because I think it's legitimately better than conforming and going with the flow.
I totally concur. I don't know how long I've been listening to you, Tim, but it's really changed a lot of the things that I used to believe into things that I then became more curious about, and then became more skeptical about, and then just became a you know, I do feel like I'm more informed as a disbeliever now, and it's kind of an odd place to be in for a lot of people, I think, because we want to fit in, and we don't always want to be that square peg in the round hole. But for me, I don't mind. I like being that square peg. I don't care, and it would be so nice to come across someone, right? Well, this girl where I work, she had started working there. She only stayed a few weeks, but somehow in the lunchroom, she brought up the subject of Robbie Parker and
nice.
the Jupiter's Delight. And I almost fell off my chair going, oh my gosh, there's someone here that I might actually get through to. But, you know what, it didn't last. So I know that there's people out here that are just so curious. And there's such a state of just peace of mind I have, knowing that the world is not going to end, that it is going to go on forever. The world that we live in is not doomed for destruction. The Bible even said that. What was happening back there in the Word is the end of the Jewish religion. And what happened in 78 AD, all the Bible had all been written, all those things had all been written before the destruction of Jerusalem back in 70 AD. And with the destruction of the temple, which is where they kept all the records for all the families and who was eligible to be a priest, who could offer sacrifices to the Lord, who would be the middleman, who would be the guy that sewed the curtains on the temple, right? They all had their specific job. Who would play the music? Which tribe you belong to? Well, all those records were destroyed in 70 AD. And so what had happened was, it was like 40 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, I believe. And so this is what I believe. 40 years after, it was like a second Exodus. The first Exodus was 40 years wandering around the desert. The second 40 years was when that generation that was all waiting for the end of their world, of their religion that they knew of at the time. That didn't mean the physical place that they lived. It was their world as they knew it, their worldview, their surroundings, their religion, their belief system was all coming to an end. And so that had all happened. And as a Christian, people, I think all Christians would believe and say that, oh yeah, we are already present with Jesus. Unless you're a Catholic, then you need a middleman like the priest to go in and pray for you. But those of us that are considered born again Christians believe that we are already.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Have access.
I see what you mean.
We already have access. So we already have the new world. We're already in it. We're already living.
Okay, I understand your perspective now, because I've been hearing for years that it's all going to end, and I'm like, they're obviously repackaging stuff to frighten the sheep. So I'm glad to hear your perspective, because that makes it more clear to me that there is no basis for it. But again, I think you agree with me, though, that they program end times into the world stage to make it more immediate and to make the propaganda more effective. But anyway, thanks for the call. And yeah, you're right about this. This raft is a platform for people who have a different take on media. So if you are the square peg, we're a bunch of square pegs in that regard here. Well, thank you very much for the call, and have a great Saturday.
Happy Saturday. Bye now.
All right, phones are open. We have a 800 number system that we're employing now. And the discussion there was simply about when you are looking at the world stage, it's World War III, it's Civil War, It's alien invasion, demonic incursions, it's illegal immigrant invasions. There's one pandemic, satanic panic, mass shooters. There's all these scenarios that we're hit with that points to this decline into the end times. Everything's going to end. And I'm suggesting that that is part of the structure of the world stage. It's part of the paradigm they give you. And it's designed to maintain this sense of scarcity of time, in addition to everything else. Conscious reality says it's the start of Pisces. This is why everything is twinning plus the fish. Everything is dual to them. They love 11. Right, we're a couple. Actually, isn't it daylight savings tomorrow? The design authority, the strangers, they're adjusting time. And then we have the equinox coming up. I mean, I haven't really been following a lot of the usual occulty stuff, except for the Super Bowl, I guess. But as we do the breakdown of the metascript, there's the part of it that does mirror a very pagan outlook on the world. And it's centered around the sun and Saturn. Their mythos is essentially about this struggle between light and dark. Sun rules the day, Saturn rules the night. And it's one of these myths that they encode into many of their movies, a lot like the Gnostic myth, which is encoded in so many movies. As far as astrology goes, they said that there was someone had pointed out that Neptune, I think it was, what was the exact day last month? Neptune entered Aries on the anniversary of the start of the Civil War. Of course, Aries, Mars, Neptune, you could associate with this upcoming Christopher Nolan, the Odyssey, Poseidon. And then you have the Poseidon nuke from Russia that could take out a coastal city, start a radioactive tsunami. But yeah, Neptune going into Aries marks of, okay, here it is. Neptune and Aries will define life's next era. I want to see if I can find the Civil War connection. Neptune and Aries mirrors the 1861 to 1875 period. Intense ideological conflict. Aggressive energy Aries drives a push for radical societal restructuring Neptune. Violent upheaval. Neptune and Aries and the Civil War parallel. Anyway, there's a few articles on this matter. I sort of looked into it. Was it JP Morgan who said that millionaires don't believe in astrology, but billionaires do? Capture the Loop says Professor Jang from Predictive History has been shining a light on the world stage. He has been in a lot of ways, although I think the way he says it, the Vatican runs religion, the Masons run intelligence agencies, and Israel runs finance. Like he still goes into these conspiratorial frameworks that I don't think are outside of the world stage, but he's close in a lot of ways. And I think he's captured the audience of people who will understand that history is not just predictive, as he describes, but quite literally fake. I don't think he can highlight the fake stuff. So he's got the right framework or approach, but I think his perspective is going to be hampered if he hasn't considered fake news cycles, fake history, long-term history bending, and how the convergence of real and fake have put us into a hyper reality, which is, for some reason, harder to believe than there are nefarious satanic cults running the world, blackmailing countries, because he is of that belief. He's an auto believer of the Epstein files, for example. So his skepticism is there, but then there's this tacit acceptance of anything coming from essentially red pill universe, QAnon level stuff. So I find that to be good marketing, I guess. That's what the numbers are right now. But again, yeah, you said it, a level 1 deprogrammer. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to talk to someone like him, or reach the same audience with these ideas that I think are compatible in most ways. But what we did early on is we jettisoned the whole who did it, the Jesuits, Israel, Illuminati, reptiles. You have all these various who done it scenarios, and it's like you don't even know what it is. We have to define what it is first, and then we'll figure out who did it. Because, for example, the J pill people, the people who blame Israel for everything, they see that in everything for some reason. And I'm like, well, what's your problem with them? I'm like, well, Israel killed Kennedy. Israel did 9/11. Israel did COVID. Israel did Sandy Hook. Israel killed Charlie. So they have all these Israel dids. And because of that, they blame Israel. But then I'm like, well, if these things were fake, if no one died on 9/11, if that was a hoax and this was a hoax and that guy's not really dead, then what exactly are you mad about? So I took the scapegoat out of it until we know what we're looking at structurally. Conscious Reality says, why were astronauts training and working with dolphins? Yeah, I remember coming across something about dolphins, LSD, telepathy, something about its large neocortex. I mean, I'm not sure, but it might be worth looking into. I remember looking into the NASA thing with dolphins. Oh, by the way, there was a bombing at a nightclub in Peru, pre-dawn hours. It's been posted pretty much everywhere. Los Angeles Times, Washington Post. Anybody care to guess how many people were injured in this nightclub bombing? Again, you shouldn't be able to know this unless you're psychic, or if you're habituated to fake events and you tend to recognize obvious hoax indicators. How many people were injured in this nightclub bombing? I'll give you a few more seconds to answer. You know, I have a bunch of those PSYOP trading cards, number 33, that I can send out to the winners. Diana, 33, Conscious Reality, Big Enchilada, 33. Yep, you're all correct. Anyway, Lord Laney brought it to my attention. He said, bombing at nightclub in Peru results in 33 people injured. Now that I'm thinking about what's the connection between PSYOPs and nightclubs, you got Pulse, George Floyd and Derek Chauvin working at a nightclub. Are they recruiting at clubs? Are club owners surreptitiously involved in the PSYOP opera? Good questions. So I posted an article about fake news cycles, and someone commented here, I understand your theory, but 9/11 was huge, and I know someone who lost his brother in one of those buildings. So I don't even take stuff like that seriously because this person is lying. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. And people get mad when you call them liars. I called out liars before, and at this point, I just trust my senses on it. You know somebody who knows somebody, sure. And what they're doing is they're what I consider to be corpse clutchers. They're trying to maintain that the story is real because they were traumatized by it, and they don't want to admit that nobody died. They can't let it go. Does this person have a name? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. So my approach now is just to say this person is really, to me, not worth addressing. You can't debate with somebody who's willing to lie. And when someone's lying like that, they just double down, they get angry and stuff. So I just hide those users from the channel. Same, if you're bearing false witness, if you're claiming to know some psyop to be real and you're in this channel, it's looking very shady. Like there's no way you should be arriving at this part of the internet if you're at all situationally aware of any of this stuff. And believing that 9/11 was real in 2026 is as mainstream as it gets. Most truthers by this point have come to realize that it was a massive drill. So did he die during the drill? You know, there were 88 drills going on that day, terror drills that had to do with planes flying into buildings. That's a lot of personnel. That's a lot of closed movie sets encompassing the Twin Towers. And you're suggesting somebody died there? Doing what? Mass casualty operator? I mean, we've already decoded, deconstructed it. Like, stay behind, stay on the world stage. We don't need someone who's willing to lie for their captors, fabricate. Copaesthetic says, my cousins, sisters, brothers, mothers, uncles, nephews, grandsons, auntie died on 9/11. You know, I kind of believe that because my dog walker, I was talking to my dog walker, and he said that his cousins, sisters, brothers, mother's uncle also has a grandson's auntie who died on 9/11. So it's a lot of anecdotal evidence. We can't just ignore it. But that's bearing false witness, and you have to be willing to call liars liars when they are. And if this person's not lying, they will provide a name and something plausible, not secondhand, third hand. It's like you're just a crisis actor at this point. Like, who was that congressman or whatever? George Santos, former state representative. He was like, my grandparents died in the Holocaust. My parents died on 9/11. I died at Sandy Hook. And nobody questioned him. And then they did. And they had to get rid of him because he was such a liar. I think they used the word a fabulist. So a fabulist is somebody who tells fables, stories, which is a polite way of saying a liar. But if you're going to say you know somebody who died at fill in the blank event, you're just a crisis actor to me. Unless you have evidence. It's a tall claim. We've been through this many times. I got into this long debate with this individual who was like, okay, there were no planes. You've made the case. So we can subtract those. But there were 9/11 jumpers. Well, you didn't see them on TV that day. It was the next day. And people will say, I remember that day. No, you don't. Like Conan O'Brien talking to Buzz Aldrin. I remember as a kid, my parents woke me up to go downstairs and watch you land on the moon. And he's like, no, you didn't. You saw an animation because there were no cameras recording us landing on the moon. When Conan O'Brien had to be corrected by Buzz Aldrin, that was great. But people do create these memories. People do fabricate memories, like lying to themselves, essentially. And it's not malicious necessarily. But if you're going to lie on behalf of the PSYOP entertainment complex, then you're a media advocate. And we don't really platform media advocacy or proselytization. I'll hear people's reasoning. Like, I am interested in different religious paradigms and ways that people look at things. So I was happy to hear a clarification on the idea that the book of Revelation isn't actually a doomsday prophecy, but it was repurposed to be such. But the doomsday concept is part of the structure of the world stage. And I think it's just to be a motivator, like a catalyst, like a cattle prod, where we have to act now or the ocean levels are going to swallow up Florida. We have to act now and when you're in fight or flight survival mode, you're easier to manipulate. I remember on April Fool's Day 2020, well, it was the night before, Richie from Boston was like, hey guys, I think on April Fool's Day, they're going to take the internet away. So order some MREs for me, use my name to get 20% off because they're probably coming for me in a black car and they're going to take me away and you're never going to hear from me again. So this guy was betting on some kind of doomsday the next day. So, buy my storable food items. And I'm thinking, if they unplug the internet, how am I going to track my order? Donna Southard says, people can heal themselves with placebos. The mind is very strong if used. Well, there are placebos and nocebos and psychosomatics. So there's another reason to unplug, to detach. If you believe in things that aren't real, you can still suffer from them. So if you're terrified of going outside at night because of space junk, if you're scared of the clouds because you think that they're toxic, if you have an inflated sense of danger or an elevated threat assessment whenever you go outside because of what you've seen on X, that can adversely affect your life by impacting your stress levels, decreasing how sociable you are, outgoing you are. I mean, you can quite literally, I think, diminish your experience here, lessen your quality of life by being overtly plugged in. And this is where skepticism really comes into the picture, because what skepticism led to was the idea that peace of mind was in fact attainable. And it's about taking the mind war out. And the reason why isn't that your head in the sand, ostrich, ignoring the facts of reality. It's you're recognizing that most of what you were reacting to was fake, not worth reacting to, a misinterpretation. Auto Hoaxer GTFO says, a psychic informed me that I was the bomb sniffing dog in my last incarnation who died in the World Trade Tower. Oh, you were the canine named Sirius. You can't be serious. So Sirius the dog has incarnated again. You know, there were a lot of conspicuous celebrities who were like who was it? Seth MacFarlane, Michael Jackson, Mark Wahlberg. A number of these celebrities, we almost lost them on 9/11 because they almost went. It's kind of like that movie Final Destination. And then Pete Davidson's dad died at 33 in one of the towers. And he's made, look, there's a rabbit trail with Pete Davidson we went down. And his movie, King of Staten Island, where he's driving and there's this car crash behind him. I think it's two cars symbolizing the Twin Towers. The clock's at like 11:30, which, I mean, the whole movie seems very much this type of code. But it has this running joke where they're mocking him or making light of the fact that his dad died on 9/11. And I found this bizarre interview where he talks about how these psychologists from like Columbia University or something would go to his house while he was growing up and test him. Do you still believe your dad's dead? He actually said this. So I've entertained the notion that Pete Davidson might not be in the know that he was born into a psyop family. Like he might be that clueless. Conscious Reality says, I barely remember the Space Challenger, but I remember people talking about it, but my memory tells me I never saw it explode. But my memory is telling me that I saw this explosion when I was in elementary school. You know, that's the misinformation effect, where your recollection is interfered with when it's recollected in the context of conflicting information. And it can be deliberately engineered. In other words, when you recollect something in that context of remembering something, your recollection and your imagining of it and your recollection get kind of clumped together. So you're trying to remember, so you're somewhat imagining it, and that becomes part of the memory. It's like a complex. And then eventually over time, you can swear by your memory. I remember Timmy fell down the well. It was Berenstain Bears, and George the monkey had a tail. And Nelson Mandela died in prison. Or whatever they say. Ed McMahon passing out giant checks. Chris says, PetSmart is now PetSmart. Okay, now those ones are clever because the Mandela effect is actually created by the person asking you, who asks you the question. Do you remember PetSmart or PetsSmart? Do you remember Joe Olstein or Joel Osteen? And it's always two. It's always a binary. If the Mandela effect was real, it wouldn't be constrained to binaries, either or. So when someone asks you, do you remember A or B? You imagine option B. It's prompted. Like, you know, you prompt Midjourney, you prompt Grok, show me an image of blank. Well, the Mandela effect interrogator is basically prompting your imagination to construct the alternate version. So now you recall PetSmart, and then you are remembering, or rather trying to remember it while imagining the alternative version. So now you can see it with and without the split between the two words in your mind. And then whether or not you choose to go with your memory or what you were just prompted to imagine depends on how good the gaslighting is, how much doubt your interrogator planted in you. And if you believe in one, you'll believe in all of them because you have this predisposition. And then also, if you're part of the community subculture of Mandela affected, you now have a group of people willing to accept you because you've perceived a similar glitch. It's like, hey, look, we're not NPCs because we know things have changed. So it has an incentive built in to go along with it. But the fact of it is, there's no such thing as a Mandela effect. It was a government psyop using the misinformation effect to destroy the eyewitness credibility of any truthers seeing through fake news. So you're like, oh, this is fake. Nobody died here. That was CGI. And also, Kit Kat used to have a hyphen and now it doesn't. And PetSmart used to be Pet Smart, and Joel Osteen used to be Joe Osteen. So then you start sounding like you're crazy because you're saying, well, reality's fake and it's always shifting. Well, if reality's fake, then how can news be fake? Or is it fake news, fake reality? And how do you tell the difference between the two? So now your perspective is you're not from objectivity, you're not from the mainstream world stage, but your perspective is one which believes that reality is constantly shifting and you're one of the minority who notices. So to me, that's an active measure, cognitive sabotage. I wouldn't trust a Mandela affected person to be my Uber driver. I wouldn't trust them as a server. Like, what if they're Mandela affected? And they're like, well, I don't know. Maybe I should drive on the other side of the road because I couldn't be wrong. The world's wrong. They're like that with words. What's more likely, that you misspelled a word or that the universe shifted and every dictionary changed? They'll be like, well, every dictionary changed. Of course I didn't misspell dilemma. All right, let's see here. Let's get back into... Oh, I didn't know this. I just got an email at 3:20. You've hit your plan limit. You've used up the minutes and text for your free trial. Your account has been put on hold. To continue using, upgrade. Okay, so I was using a trial of this 800 number, and I liked the system, and it just went down because I've exhausted my free trial. So I'm going to be upgrading, and the number you see on the screen is not the number we're going to stick to. If you have any suggestions, what word should I put into the 800 number? 855 meta script, probably too many letters, but I can work something out. So that's going to happen next. So probably tomorrow, when we are live again, we'll have an 800 number. And those of you who are trying to call in, I apologize. I thought it was going to shut off at midnight. I'm glad we started early. We got at least one call in. And I'm going to listen back and check the audio levels. I might need to pick up a small auxiliary speaker. And then also I have a secondary phone device that might even be better than my laptop. So we'll see. But regardless, it's going to improve over the next day or two. Plain decoded says 4224 fits you. Yeah, I would like if it was like a 713. But 4224 is pretty good. And we will be doing breakdowns of these numbers. Oh, good one. 1-800-2-DEBUNK etheric bliss. 1-800-2-DEBUNK. And I'm always going to try to get auto hoax. 855 program. Now, deprogram. If I could get deprogram into this. All right, I'll take these suggestions down, and then I'll upgrade this thing here shortly. I want to say thanks to all who have contributed to the channel, your comments, your thoughts, and otherwise. It's all going to be upgrades. In fact, today I have to go pick up my lavalier. It's the microphone for the lapel, so I can start working on these whiteboards. I did a breakdown of one earlier today, the news cycles, fake history. That's the video I was referring to where somebody had said that they know somebody whose dog walker's uncle's grandmother's niece had a best friend who knew somebody who was friends with someone whose father died on 9/11. And I was like, yeah, that's not true. Dorian says 1-800-GTFO-33. That's pretty good. 1-800-GTFO-33. Paradoxymoronis 1-800-D program. Yeah, I'm getting some license plate ideas now. But yeah, I'll set up a vanity number. If I'm able to find something that matches one of these, I will. All right, we'll see you all in Discord. And if you go to ips.monster, I'll put a link really quick. I have the updated Discord link, and you can see what we're working on right now. By the end of the weekend, I'm striving to have this Charlie Kirk is Alive ebook and video completed. So that's another project I'm working on, along with the general deconstruction work. Have a great weekend, and we'll chat in Discord.